Have you ever noticed how people change the moment you stop playing your part? At first, they're kind, charming, attentive. They reflect back to you the version of yourself they want you to believe. But it's not you they love. It's the illusion you maintain. The version that fits their needs. The version that stays small, agreeable, predictable. Carl Jung believed that the roles we play, especially in relationships, are masks we wear to survive. And sometimes these masks are not chosen. They're inherited from trauma, from childhood, from the quiet desperation to be loved, even if it means being invisible. But here's what no one tells you. The illusion doesn't break when you argue. It doesn't break when you cry. It breaks when you walk away. Not with anger, not with revenge, but with clarity. Because when you leave, not just physically, but emotionally, psychologically, you force the other person to face the version of themselves they were hiding from all along. And that's terrifying. Because many relationships aren't built on truth. They're built on control. They require your silence. They depend on your confusion. They thrive on your need for them. And when that need dies, so does their power. Walking away isn't about abandoning others. It's about finally refusing to abandon yourself. It's not the act of walking that reveals who they are. It's what your absence unmasks. You begin to see the manipulation, the guilt, the shifting blame. You see how quickly "I love you" becomes "you'll regret this." That shift? That's not love falling apart. That's the illusion dissolving. And Jung knew this. The unconscious will do anything to protect itself. From shame, from truth, from the pain of not being in control. So when you walk away, what you're really doing is stepping out of the role you were never meant to play. You stop being a mirror. You become a witness. And what you witness isn't always beautiful. But it's real. Because walking away doesn't only show you who they are, it shows you who you've been pretending to be. And in that quiet space after the door closes, you're finally alone with your own reflection. No more bending, no more performance, just silence, just you. At first, that silence is heavy. It echoes. It reminds you of every part of you that got erased just to be accepted. But stay in it. Because if you do, if you resist the urge to return, to apologize, to perform, something else starts to happen. The guilt softens, the fear fades, and what's left is self-respect. The kind of self-respect that doesn't scream, it doesn't beg, it doesn't explain itself. It just walks away and lets the illusion collapse. There's a moment after you walk away that no one prepares you for. It doesn't feel like power. It doesn't feel like freedom. It feels empty. Because when you've spent years being what others needed, quiet, supportive, soft-edged, walking away doesn't feel like liberation. It feels like loss. Not just the loss of the relationship, but the loss of identity. The version of yourself you sculpted to survive. And in that emptiness, the mind begins to whisper, "Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I'm the problem." That voice isn't weakness, it's conditioning. It's the residue of a nervous system trained to fear disconnection more than dishonesty. Carl Jung called this complexes, psychic wounds that live beneath awareness but dictate behavior. They whisper old fears in a new voice. They sabotage clarity with doubt. And in that moment of silence, the complex wants you to crawl back. Because even pain can feel safer than uncertainty. But don't. Don't negotiate with the part of you that only knows how to survive. You're not here to survive anymore. You're here to live. And life begins where performance ends. Because the illusion you left behind wasn't just their creation. It was a collaboration. You helped build it. With every smile that wasn't real, With every "I'm fine," that meant "I'm exhausted." With every time you said yes when your body screamed no, you weren't just in a relationship with them, you were in a performance with yourself. And leaving means tearing down that stage. That's why it hurts. The pain isn't proof you were wrong, it's proof you're waking up. Healing isn't a straight line, it's a spiral. It loops through memories, regrets, and replays of conversations you wish had ended differently. You'll want closure, you'll crave validation, you'll imagine the perfect text that makes them see what they lost. But let me tell you something, real healing begins the moment you stop waiting for them to understand. You don't need them to see it, you need to stop needing them to. Because the more you cling to being seen, the more power you give to the person who refused to look. This is where the real work begins. It's not glamorous, it's not aesthetic, it's shadow work. Jung believed that our shadow isn't evil, it's just rejected. And what you reject doesn't disappear. It waits. It waits for silence. It waits for stillness. It waits for the moment after you walk away, when the noise dies down and you can finally hear your own voice again. That voice won't sound strong at first. It might tremble, it might doubt, it might be angry or numb or both, but it's real. And you don't have to perform for it, you just have to listen. This is the space where you begin to reparent the self you abandoned to belong. You give yourself permission to be whole without being pleasing, to be seen without being perfect, to exist without explaining. And that's terrifying, for people who only knew how to love you when you were small. They'll say you've changed. They'll say you're selfish. They'll call your boundaries walls. They'll call your growth coldness. But remember, people addicted to control will always mistake your peace for rejection. Let them. This is not your burden to carry. You are not the guardian of their comfort. You are the steward of your own becoming. There's a shift that happens when you no longer react. Not with anger, not with defense, just silence. And that silence isn't passive, it's a boundary. It says, I no longer feed this pattern. It says, I'm not who I used to be. But to someone addicted to control, your silence is a threat. Because silence says everything they were trying to avoid, that they never had you. Not truly. They had your fear, your guilt, your loyalty to the image, not the reality of the connection. And when that illusion falls, they don't grieve the real you. They grieve the version of you that stayed despite the harm. That's why leaving feels violent to them. Even if you whisper, even if you bow out gently, even if you simply stop responding. To them, your peace is betrayal. But to you, it's rebirth. Carl Jung wrote that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. What they called love was often dependency. What they called closeness was control. What they called support was self-abandonment. And now that you've walked away, they're left alone with the mirror you used to be. They might lash out. They might twist the story. They might even beg you to come back, but only to the role you used to play, not to who you are now. And this is the crossroads. Because healing isn't just about leaving, it's about staying gone, even when it's lonely, even when the memory feels warmer than the truth, especially then, because your nervous system doesn't crave what's healthy. It craves what's familiar. And what was familiar was abandonment dressed up as devotion. So when you feel the urge to go back, pause. Ask yourself, do I miss them? Or do I miss the version of me who needed their approval to feel worthy? That version isn't bad. She was surviving. He was adapting. They were doing what they had to do to be loved. But you're not there anymore. You're not surviving. You're remembering. You're reclaiming. And that brings us here, to this very moment, to this voice in your headphones, to this silence you chose. If this resonates with something deep inside you, if it reminds you of who you've been and who you're becoming, then don't keep walking alone. Subscribe. Not because I'm telling you to, but because you know you've just begun to see what they never wanted you to. And there's more to uncover, more to unlearn, more to remember. Because healing doesn't come in one moment. It comes in layers, in echoes, in reminders like this. Let this be one of them. And here's what no one tells you. Growth doesn't look like strength at first. It looks like distance. It looks like quiet dinners. It looks like not texting back. It looks like sitting in your room asking yourself, was I ever loved, or was I just needed? There is a difference. Love allows. Need consumes. Love makes space. Need demands presence, even when it hurts you to give it. Walking away reveals that difference in full color. You begin to see how often you were used as a placeholder for their pain. You weren't their partner, you were their bandage. But now the wound is open. And you're learning to stop bleeding for people who wouldn't offer you a single thread. That's real healing. It's not pretty. It doesn't come with applause. There's no celebration, just quiet dignity. And the return of your own energy. You'll notice it one day. When you laugh without guilt. When you say no without explanation. When you sleep peacefully knowing you didn't fold just to be liked. That's when you'll know. You didn't just walk away from them. You walked back to yourself. That's why they're angry. Not because you left, but because you're no longer reachable by the version of you they had power over. They lost access, and you gained sovereignty. So if you're in that in-between space, not quite healed, not going back, just hovering in the unknown, stay there. That space is sacred. Don't rush it. Don't numb it. Don't fill it. Just stay. Let it shape you. Let it rebuild you. Let it whisper to you all the truths that got buried under love. Because the illusion is gone now, and in its place is you. Some people only loved the version of you that didn't love yourself, the version that said yes too quickly, that apologized just to keep the peace, that laughed when it wasn't funny, that stayed when it hurt. They didn't love your soul, they loved your silence. And when that silence broke, when you finally chose yourself over them, what they felt wasn't abandonment. It was exposure. Because for the first time, you held up a mirror. And they didn't like what they saw. Not because of who you are, but because of who they pretended to be while you played small. Carl Jung believed that the people around us often serve as projections of our unconscious. We don't just see them, we see our shadow, our fears, our unmet needs, and they see the same in us. So when you leave a toxic dynamic, you're not just breaking a pattern, you're pulling your energy out of someone else's illusion. And illusions don't die quietly. They cling, they manipulate, they rewrite the story so they're still the hero. That's why you hear them say things like, "You changed," "You're cold now," "You used to care." But did you? Or did you just perform care to be safe? There's a difference between being loving and being conditioned to people please. And the real you, the one that's emerging now, they've never met that version. Because the real you doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't overextend just to prove worth. The real you sets fires to bridges built on manipulation and watches them burn with grace. That's evolution. It's not cruel, it's clean. And in the aftermath, there's space. Space to feel everything you once buried, the grief, the anger, the loneliness, and strangely, the freedom. Because for the first time, you realize that solitude isn't empty, it's sacred. You are not meant to fill your life with noise just to avoid your truth. You're meant to hear it. And your truth is this: You deserve connection that doesn't cost your identity, love that doesn't come with conditions, support that doesn't feel like surveillance. But here's the catch. That kind of connection only shows up when you stop entertaining what isn't it. That's the real heartbreak, not losing them, but realizing how long you abandoned yourself to keep them. Forgive yourself for that. You did what you knew. You loved how you were taught. You stayed because leaving wasn't modeled for you. But now you know better. Now you leave before you're shattered. Now you honor your body when it tenses. Now you trust your gut when it whispers, "This isn't safe." And even if no one claps for this version of you, the version that protects their peace, that doesn't explain every decision, that walks away quietly, know this: that silence, that calm, that emptiness, it's not absence, it's space, it's power. It's where the next version of you begins. And it's not a lonely space, it's an honest one. It doesn't need fixing, it needs witnessing. You are not broken, you are in bloom. Let those who cannot hold your silence disqualify themselves. Let those who only love the echo fall silent. Because the real you is here now, and you no longer need to shrink to be seen. Sometimes the loudest part of healing is the silence no one else sees. You're not crying, you're not falling apart, you're not screaming into pillows, you're just done. And that kind of quiet doesn't get sympathy. It gets misunderstood, because they expect breakdowns, they expect chaos. But real healing, it's quieter than that. It's saying no without defending it. It's blocking the number and not checking if they called. It's walking away and not rehearsing what you'd say if they stopped you. It's the unspoken reclaiming of your time, your peace, your energy. Carl Jung taught that individuation, the process of becoming your true self, requires the death of who you were taught to be. And death is quiet, not theatrical, just irreversible. You don't argue with your past anymore. You don't justify your growth. You stop asking people to understand why you had to leave. Because that version of you, the one that needed to be understood, validated, rescued, they're gone. You don't owe your absence an explanation. And slowly, the world starts to rearrange itself around your energy. New people show up, not ones who want to shape you, but ones who recognize you. Because healed energy is unmistakable. It doesn't perform, it doesn't chase, it doesn't confuse loyalty with self-sacrifice. It walks into a room and doesn't need to be the loudest voice, because it knows its presence is the message. But here's the paradox. As you heal, you start to grieve, not the people, not the relationships, but the version of yourself that stayed too long, the one who didn't know better, the one who kept hoping they'd change. Forgive them, that you was doing their best, that you kept you alive, that you was the reason you're still standing. So don't hate your past self, honor them, and then let them go. Because you're not healing to become someone new. You're healing to return to who you've always been, before the world taught you to forget. Jung believed that the path to wholeness requires a confrontation with the shadow. And the shadow isn't always dark. Sometimes it looks like the people you thought you couldn't live without, the jobs you thought defined you, the identities you wore like armor. But you're shedding all of that now, and it's disorienting, because no one tells you that healing feels like losing your place in the world. But the truth is, you were never meant to fit into something that demanded you shrink. You were never supposed to be digestible. You are not here to make others comfortable. You're here to make yourself whole. And whole people, they intimidate. Not because they're loud, but because they can't be manipulated. Not because they don't feel, but because they don't abandon themselves to be chosen. And if that makes you too much, too distant, too intense for some people, let it. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to understand yourself. Because when you know who you are, deeply, quietly, unshakably, no one can use confusion to control you. You become the boundary. You become the calm. You become the silence that speaks louder than their noise. And that silence, that's the sound of a soul coming home. Healing doesn't feel like a sunrise. It feels like fog. You're not sure where you're going. You're not sure who you are. You just know who you're not anymore. And that's enough. Because clarity doesn't come all at once. It comes in pieces. In moments where you choose yourself, in situations where you used to abandon yourself. In moments where you hold your boundary, even when your voice shakes. In moments where you no longer explain your pain to people committed to misunderstanding you. That's not ego, that's growth. Carl Jung believed that true transformation begins when the mask cracks, when the persona you've used to survive no longer fits the self you're becoming. And that's terrifying, because the mask got you here. It helped you navigate rooms that weren't safe. It kept you from drowning when you didn't yet know how to swim. But now it's suffocating you. You can't keep wearing something that hides your breath, so you let it go. You let go of the people who only knew how to love your mask. You let go of the dynamics that made you small so they could feel big. You let go of your need to be understood by people who never even tried to listen. And in that letting go, you begin to hear something else. Yourself. Not the you they trained, not the you that performed, the real one, the one who's always been there, waiting. And she's not loud, he's not demanding, they're patient. But now they're ready. Ready for a life that doesn't shrink to be safe. Ready for a love that doesn't make you prove your worth. Ready for peace that doesn't come with punishment. You won't find this version of you in validation, or in revenge, or in someone finally saying, "I'm sorry." You'll find it in the silence that used to scare you, in the stillness that used to feel like a threat, in the quiet choice to stay gone. That's where power lives now, not in how loudly you can argue, but in how easily you can walk away, not in being unbreakable, but in being unshakable. That's the difference. Breakable people seek control. Unshakable people release it. They don't beg to be seen. They see themselves. And in doing so, they make it impossible for others to project their unhealed parts onto them. They stop absorbing pain that was never theirs to hold. They stop performing love to avoid loss, because the real loss was always losing themselves, but not anymore. Now, you return, not as a warrior, but as a witness, not with fire, but with calm, not to fight, but to live. You return to your body, to your breath, to your truth. And that truth? It's not always poetic. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it's awkward. Sometimes it says no with shaking hands. Sometimes it closes doors that ache to stay open. But it's honest, and honest is enough. So if you've made it this far, if you're still here, still listening, still holding space for your own becoming, then hear this. You are not too late. You are not too broken. You are not too much. You are right on time. And the version of you who walked through hell and didn't become it, that version deserves more than just survival. They deserve arrival. This is it. This is arrival. Now breathe. You're home. And if this message echoed something deep inside you, if you saw yourself in these words, if you felt the mirror crack and the mask fall, then let's not walk this path alone. Subscribe, not just for content, not just for commentary, but because you know this is what you've been searching for. A place to remember, a place to unlearn, a place to become. This isn't the end. It's where your story starts to speak. Let's walk it, one truth at a time.